The ending sequence of Clear Sky has been the source of many questions over the years. What happened to the Clear Sky faction and the protagonist, S.T.A.L.K.E.R? How did Strelok manage to survive? What does the final cutscene really mean? Hello stalkers and welcome to the Anomalous Dugout. In this video, we will try to answer all of these questions by formulating some theories as well as a few scenarios of what could have happened. But before we do that, I suggest you go watch the previous lore and theories videos if you haven't already, because we are going to use some of the elements we have established in those episodes for our current topic. Oh, and the video will contain heavy spoilers for the Stalker games, so be aware of that. Anyway, let us start by recapping what we know. At the end of the game Clear Sky, a group of fighters from the Clear Sky faction, commanded by the leader Lebedev and assisted by the mercenary S.T.A.L.K.E.R, reached the center of the zone in an attempt to stop Strelok from entering the power plant sarcophagus. Strelok was, of course, a stalker who already managed to go to the CNPP once and was trying to get there for the second time, but his actions were creating such disastrous emissions that the Clear Sky faction decided to stop him. Clear Sky's plan was simple. Armed with an electromagnetic rifle, S.T.A.L.K.E.R was supposed to fire at Strelok to disable his psy-protection. But there's already some mystery here. Why don't they simply shoot at Strelok with real bullets and kill him? And why would disabling his psy-protection actually stop him? As far as we know, when Strelok went to the CNPP for the first time, he did not use any psy-protection. That is because the Brain Scorcher, the device preventing people from getting to the center of the zone, does not seem to cover the entire territory with psi emissions. Since Strelok and his group managed to bypass it using tunnels and then freely move into Pripyat and the CNPP, I think that the Brain Scorcher's area of influence is more like a ring, and the interior of this ring is not affected by psi emissions. Besides, it doesn't seem that Lebedev or S.T.A.L.K.E.R use any psi protection either, at least not that we can see. However, there are some elements that contradict what I just said. First, it seems that Clear Sky fighters do actually have some kind of psi protection integrated into their suits, because when talking about the EM1 rifle, Lebedev says,
"Without protection, Strelok won't last long under the emission. Even our own suits can barely neutralize the field."
Moreover, the detailed description of the final task mentions that the psi field intensity at the station is off the scale, but Strelok is protected from the psi emissions by the prototype. Of course, the said prototype is a psi helmet that Strelok acquired at the scientists in Yentar. So here's my theory. After the first expedition of Strelok to the CNPP, the C consciousness, which is the united minds of a group of scientists hiding in the center of the zone, realized that the protection from the Brain Scorcher was not enough, and so they either started to install other psi devices to cover more territory, or they modified the Brain Scorcher to now cover the territory inside the center of the zone. In both cases, this means that the area of the CNPP, which used to be free of psi emissions before Clear Sky, became affected by a new psi field. I'm not sure if this psi field was still active during the events of Shadow of Chernobyl though, as the military is able to attack the CNPP without suffering from the effects of psi waves. Maybe the field was disabled along with the Brain Scorcher, or the military also has protection, who knows. In any case, we are deviating a bit from our subject, so let's go back to the point. After S.T.A.L.K.E.R manages to disable Strelok's psy-protection, an emission suddenly occurs. Lebedev can be heard shouting in the radio that his head is going to explode. So it seems that he really was not expecting this to happen, and that he does suffer from the emission. What could have happened to Lebedev we already talked about in the very first episode of the Lore and Theories series. After that, the screen goes to black, and the final cutscene plays. At the beginning of this sequence, it seems that we look through the eyes of a stalker who is in this corridor. So either we are still S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and this is what he sees when he wakes up, or we get the point of view of another random stalker who's lying there. In any case, the scene shows some stalkers in a corridor. They all seem to be unconscious and in the process of being brainwashed. Strelok himself is shown, and he already has the famous stalker tattoo on his arm. This tattoo means that he is now an agent of the sea consciousness, programmed for a particular mission. Later, he will be sent back to the zone along with other agents in a transport called Death Truck, and the rest of his story unfolds in Shadow of Chernobyl. We can assume that all the other stalkers shown in the cutscene will suffer the same fate. Now, if you look closely, it does not seem that any member of the Clear Sky faction is in this corridor. Indeed, the stalkers wear leather jackets, sunrise and seva suits, and even duty uniforms, but there is not a single Clear Sky suit on site. This leads me to the first and most likely scenario, which is that all the Clear Sky members died during the emission. Indeed, they were caught completely out of cover in a huge blowout, which, as we saw in our previous Lore and Theories video, is supposed to kill you, even when wearing psy-protection. As for S.T.A.L.K.E.R, he does have a special ability that allowed him to survive 2 of these emissions already, but Lebedev assured him that eventually his nervous system would burn out. Moreover, getting caught in any unscripted emission in the game will kill S.T.A.L.K.E.R, implying that his ability reached its limit and that a 3rd blowout would probably kill him. And for Strelok, well, we don't know. Maybe he also has some sort of gift that protected him from the emission, or maybe he was very close to the CNPP when his psy-protection was shut down, and in an ultimate effort he managed to run inside just in time, only to succumb to the psy field a few moments later. So in that scenario, everyone dies except Strelok. Now let's assume that the character from which we get the point of view in the final cutscene is indeed S.T.A.L.K.E.R. In that case, it's possible that he survived the emission thanks to his gift, but much like Strelok, he did fall under the influence of the psy emissions. Then, he will either become a marked agent, or join the ranks of the monolith. Indeed, a very popular theory explains that even if the members of Clear Sky cannot directly be seen in the cutscene, they are indeed in the corridor, and they are going to be turned into fighters of the monolith faction. This would explain the growth in numbers of this group in Shadow of Chernobyl, but it would also imply that the sea consciousness had the power to save the Clear Sky faction from death to the blowout. If it really happened like this, then the theory that Lebedev joined the sea consciousness, which we presented in the very first Lore and Theories episode, could make sense. Also, there is another very well-known theory that after being recruited in the ranks of the monolith, S.T.A.L.K.E.R became Charon, one of the faction's leaders, who can be seen in Pripyat in Shadow of Chernobyl. there is not really any evidence to back this up, apart from the fact that Charon is one of the only, if not the only NPC to use a VINT-RBC or VSS Vintorez, the same weapon used by S.T.A.L.K.E.R at the beginning of his adventure. But that's more of a coincidence than a piece of evidence. So we get two more scenarios here. One where all Clear Sky fighters are turned into monolith warriors or agents, including S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and one where the Clear Sky members die to the emission, but not S.T.A.L.K.E.R, who joins the monolith. Yet, something bothers me about these two scenarios, which is the fact that somehow S.T.A.L.K.E.R is turned into a monolithian and Strelok into an agent, despite them being in the same brainwashing room. So now let's consider that S.T.A.L.K.E.R also became a marked agent like Strelok did. In this scenario, a lot of different things could happen. The process of transporting the agents back into the zone using death drugs is known to be very dangerous, and according to the Sea Consciousness representative,
more than half of stalkers die during transportation.
Therefore, there would be a good chance that S.T.A.L.K.E.R simply dies as well. But then again, if Strelok survived, why not S.T.A.L.K.E.R? He's one of the strongest fellas in the zone, especially thanks to his unnatural abilities, that, in the words of Lebedev,
which help you survive anomalous activity that would literally tear anyone else down to atoms. Also, it looks like something is increasing your body's performance in several areas, to the point where our monitoring equipment goes off the scale.
So, let's imagine that S.T.A.L.K.E.R survived the transport process, and ends up somewhere in the zone. Then he would most likely have a mission in his PDA and a very strong mental command in his head that would urge him to complete this mission. Maybe he also got the task to kill Strelok, or perhaps something completely different. At first I thought that he could have had the mission to kill Feng, one of Strelok's men. Feng went to the CNPP along with Strelok during their first trip there, so he's as much of a target for the Sea Consciousness after all. Moreover, Feng was killed by a mercenary with a scar on his face, using a Vintorez. That's how Ghost, the other man from Strelok's group, described the killer. I won't enter into all the details, because I already did in my video about Feng himself, but the description of the murderer fits S.T.A.L.K.E.R quite well. In fact, it seems that killing Feng was actually supposed to be a mission in the game Clear Sky, but it was removed. Unfortunately, it seems that S.T.A.L.K.E.R returning as a marked agent to shoot down Feng is impossible, because Feng was killed just before Strelok went to the center of the zone alone, so it was before the ending of Clear Sky. In any case, in this fourth scenario, S.T.A.L.K.E.R becomes an agent and is still alive, somewhere in the zone. Now it's time for the last and most crazy scenario of them all. Assuming that the point of view at the beginning of the cutscene is really from S.T.A.L.K.E.R, we can see that he opens his eyes despite the fact that all the other stalkers here are clearly unconscious. Also, notice where S.T.A.L.K.E.R is placed compared to Strelok, almost directly in front of him. In the next scene, we see the bodies on the opposite side of Strelok, so we can assume that one of these is S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Then, at the very end of the cutscene, one of the stalkers raises his arm. Remember, all the other persons here are clearly unconscious and seem to be unable to make such a movement. What I'm trying to say is that S.T.A.L.K.E.R, probably because of his unnatural resistances to the dangers of the zone, resisted the brainwashing process and is the only one in the room who's conscious. These can mean multiple different things. Maybe he's trying to fight the brainwashing, but he's struggling. Or he's just only starting to wake up, and is then gonna stand and try to escape from that place. Perhaps he will even explore the area and find out about the sea consciousness. Who knows? That's a lot of speculation, but I think that arm movement was worth to talk about. Surely it will ignite the imagination of all the fans of S.T.A.L.K.E.R. So tell me what you think in the comments, and write down your own scenarios. I'll make sure to read all of them. That said, it's time to wrap up the video. In the end, there are many different possibilities regarding what happened to Clear Sky fighters as well as S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and we simply don't know the truth. Until next time, thank you for watching, stalkers, and goodbye.